I've been using the H2D now for 30 days and I've discovered it's got a huge 3D printer problem. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what this is, what causes you to actually need to use this, why you should care, and if I regret purchasing the H2D. So before we begin, let me give you some background on my 3D printer experience and why I actually chose the H2D. So for the better part of a year and a half, I've been using two Bambu Lab A1s and they've been absolutely great. They print really well. They're also not super expensive. So if you're a beginner, it's definitely a great option. So I got into 3D printing because I wanted to create and print out my own 3D printed props, which I do sell on my Etsy shop. I'll put a link in the video description in case you guys want to check that out yourself. And the A1s have been great for that. They do multiple colors, but the biggest issue that I ran into were when I was printing props that had a lot of different color changes, such as this handle here. This only used two different colors. We've got the yellow and the black, but as you can see here, if you don't totally purge out all the black filament and it goes to the yellow, you get a lot of color bleed. And if you want this to come out perfectly, there's a ton of waste. I probably wasted maybe a full roll of filament between the black and the yellow just to get a really decent print to come out. And that's actually why I chose the H2D in the first place, because it has two different nozzles and it can have two different color filaments. And if you're only printing two different colors, there's pretty much no waste at all. Or at least that's what I thought. And that's where this is going to come in later on in the video. Now, don't get me wrong, the H2D is a nice printer, but I just don't know that it's worth the asking price. And there's also some issues that I ran into that I'll show you in this video as well. And just so you know, this is not a sponsored video at all. Bambu Lab did not send me anything. I had to purchase this with my own money. So now let me show you some of the prints that I've printed out over the past month with the H2D, what the quality looks like, and why you're gonna need this. So after the unboxing last night, I set up my H2D in my basement workshop and we did our very first print. I printed a poop bin because even though the H2D doesn't have a lot of waste, it still does purge a little bit of filament because it does a flow calibration before every print, and that's how I want it because I want the best print possible. Now, the one thing about the setup that I have here is the fact that I only have one AMS2 unit that's going to the right nozzle. This can accommodate 4 different colors. And for the left nozzle, I just simply have the manual spool right here. So when I put in this filament for the first time, you have to manually feed it in just like you kind of do the A1. You can also have another AMS2 set up for the left nozzle that would make everything automated, so you wouldn't have to keep manually feeding the left nozzle filament in. But it's a little bit more pricey and I didn't want to do that right now. So for now, I just have the AMS2 for the right nozzle. So it took about 4 hours to print the poop bin, and I just let it print overnight because I wasn't going to stay up for 4 hours until this got done. But here is the poop bin. We are using the textured PEI plate that came with the H2D, and there's the print. You can see I printed this without any supports. There is some stringing on the top here, not too bad, but overall I think it looks pretty good. So we'll take the print out here. Oh, it just came right off. It doesn't look like there was any separation last night, but the bottom looks perfect. I mean, look at that. There's the texturing. I don't see any issues whatsoever. It doesn't look like it was lifting in any of the corners. And this isn't even the best quality. This is about 0.20. I still think that came out pretty good. There's a couple little like knots right there. But overall, I think the print looks pretty darn good. So that is our very first print for the H2D. Very happy with the result. Another thing I was really curious about is if the H2D would actually move on its own, because it does move around a lot when it's printing. I put down this piece of tape here right in front just to see if it moved any during its printing, and it doesn't seem to have, because I saw a post on Reddit where somebody had an H2D. They woke up in the morning and the thing was on the floor. I don't know the circumstances of what happened, but I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't actually kind of wiggling so much that it would actually come off the table, and it doesn't seem to have. And then here is the poop bin all installed on the back of the H2D. You can see it doesn't take up a lot of room and it fits perfectly. Doesn't obstruct any airflow behind the unit. I think that looks pretty good. And it's held in place without any screws or anything. It just kind of fits right into the little poop slot in the back. So for the very second print, we're going to be printing a little base for one of my Etsy props. It's going to end up looking something like this. This was actually printed on my Bambu Lab A1. This is kind of just like a test print. It didn't come out very good. So we're going to see how this comes out on the H2D. Now the reason why I chose the H2D to do this is because this uses two different colors. One is the main color, which is silver, and if you look at these little triangles here, it's inlaid with a black filament. So the H2D should work perfectly for this and minimize on some of the purge waste that you would use for the filament. I've also switched out to my smooth PEI plate. You can see there. And we are using the left and the right nozzles. We've got my AMS loaded with the black color and the external with the silk silver. And the whole project should take about 5 hours and 13 minutes to complete. And it did also automatically open up this little slot right here to allow some airflow to come in. And I think it might have opened it up on the back as well. Yep, there, as you can see, the little fins here have opened up to allow some of the air to come out the back. Another thing that I really like about the H2D is how quiet it is. When this door is closed, it is super quiet, especially compared to my Bambu Lab A1, which is just all open and doesn't have any enclosure. I don't know if you guys can tell from this video, but the H2D is putting down some really clean lines. So far, I am pretty impressed. And right now it's changing over to the black filament. So you can see how quickly it changes and gets back to printing. And there it is, back to printing. That was the very first time it's printed the black, so it might have taken a little bit longer to kind of purge out a little bit. But we'll see it switch back to the silver in just a minute. It's doing it right now. And it's back to the silver. That was super quick. Way quicker than the A1 would have been using the AMS light. Another thing I love about the H2D is it has this LED status bar here that shows the progress of your print. So at a glance, even from far away, you can just look at the printer, see where the LED bar is at, or whether or not your print is done, so you don't have to come right up to the H2D to see if it's actually done printing. So just walking into my workshop here, I can just kind of glance over at the H2D and see where the status is just by simply looking at the little status LED. All right, so there we have our very second ever print for the H2D. Now, if you've never used a 3D printer before, I would definitely recommend that as soon as it's done printing, don't take it right off of the plate. You can take the plate out of your printer, but don't rip the print right off when it's still hot, because it can be somewhat still malleable because of the heat. So I would definitely just take this whole plate out, rest it aside somewhere, and let it cool off before you take your print. So on the bed here, it does look like there are some like pieces of debris like from the printer. Not horrible. There are some underneath here as well, but for the most part, I think the bed is pretty clean. And let's take a look at our print. So again, be very careful because the the sheet will be pretty hot when you take it off, so I'd like to take it and hold it from the edges. But the print looks pretty good. I do see some stringing in the front of the piece here. There is a little bit of like artifact on one side here, so it's definitely not perfect. Not sure why those are there, but I think for the most part, the print does look pretty good. So I'm going to set this off to the side, let it cool, and then we'll take it off the bed and take a closer look. All right, so the plate is now pretty cool, and the only thing you need to do is to take this off is to kind of bend the bed up, and the print should release pretty easily, just like that. And then you have a couple pieces that might be stuck to the bed. You could use a scraper, or you can also just try to break them off if you can. They usually come right off, and then the bed is pretty clean. And then once we take the print off, I typically can still use the same thing before I clean it, maybe a couple more times, but you don't want to use it any more than that before you clean it again, because things might not adhere to the plate itself. All right, so let's take a closer look at the print. For the most part, I do think it looks pretty good. There are a couple flaws on here that I'll show you. This one on the side, that's not from the printer. It's because I made the little edge too thin. I'll have to reinforce that. But on the front here, like I showed you before, it's got like these little marks on the front of the print and kind of down here and on the insides. Again, I'm not sure why it did that. And we also have like on the black portion, we have these little these little pieces of filament like sticking up like little hairs on the inside. You can easily fix this by, using a razor blade very carefully, but I'm not 100% sure why those are actually like that, because my A1 didn't do that, and my A1 also didn't print these little like nubs here. I'm not really sure. This filament is also brand new. I just took it out of the package, so I don't think that it's collected any moisture. So again, not really too sure why it's doing that. On the inside edge here, there is a little bit of like rippling. You guys can see that. The top looks really good though. The back looks pretty good as well. Bottom, really nice. Very nice there. And on the sides here, pretty good. It's just on the front here, these little nubs, I don't know what they're like, little zits or something. But that's our second ever print on the H2D. So after seeing the results of our second print here, I really wasn't happy. You saw that there were these little bumps on the front of the base, and I couldn't understand why this was happening, because when I printed this out on the A1, it printed really well and did not have any of these issues. So I went on to print just the front part of this base 3 more times, and each time I printed it out, it progressively got worse and worse. So I was racking my brain. I couldn't understand why this was happening, so I actually started one of the prints, and then I just stood in front of the printer and I was trying to see exactly what it was doing, and I finally figured it out. I noticed when the H2D was swapping nozzles to use for the different colors on the base that it would actually linger for just a few seconds, but those few seconds were just enough to allow a little bit of filament to kind of ooze out of the nozzle, and then it would go right to the print, causing these little imperfections. And the reason why I didn't see this issue with the A1 is because right after the filament swap, it would go right to printing. It didn't linger like the H2D does. So there was no time to have a little bit of filament kind of ooze out of the nozzle. Now, I'm not sure if this was an issue with retraction, maybe something with the G code. I'm not really sure, but I did also adjust the temperature of the silver filament about 10 degrees Celsius to kind of help with the oozing. But even though I did that, it still kind of oozed a little bit. So I went to the forums. I wanted to see if anybody else was having these issues. And in this one post, somebody suggests using a prime tower. So basically what the prime tower does is it takes the brunt of all of the issues that would have been transferred onto your actual print. So that little bit of oozing that happened from the nozzle will go right onto this prime tower, and when it's done being perfectly laid out on the prime tower, it then goes right to your print, making it really nice and there's no imperfections. So just because one print worked perfectly fine on one printer, it might not work perfectly fine on another, and there might be some little tweaks here and there that you might have to make, like I did with my going from my A1 to the H2D. So as I'm sure you've already noticed, the H2D has moved, and I moved it over from the table next to my window. The table was really too high. It was a little bit more difficult to access the AMS. So I went to IKEA and I bought this little desk specifically for the H2D, and I moved it over here now so the AMS is way more accessible. And I actually have a print sitting in the H2D that's actually been finished since yesterday, but I didn't want to take it out until I had time to film with you guys. So we're actually taking this out for the first time and seeing how the print actually is together. So this is the print that I did after I got the front piece that I was really happy with. Take this out for the very first time. And it does seem like there's still some little inconsistencies in the front. You guys can see kind of right here, there's still some, kind of focus in, there's still some dots kind of right on the front here. But for the most part, it looks really good. And here is that prime tower on the back here that kind of got the brunt of all the imperfections. You can kind of see this, all these little black filament spots on the top here. You can see how they're coming off of the prime tower. And those probably would have been on the actual print itself if I wouldn't have used this prime tower. So there's a ton of different things that can go wrong with your 3D print. A lot of adjustments to be made, but it seems like the prime tower has fixed a lot of the issues that I was having on the other bases. So you can see those issues a little better right here, kind of coming off the side, like right here. That's what was kind of on my print. And here's what it looks like with all these supports removed. Overall, I think it came out pretty good. Again, there's these little minor inconsistencies on the base here, but for the most part, I think it looks pretty good. And that first layer underneath the print is absolutely beautiful. So one issue that I just ran into when I was trying to swap out the color on the manual holder for the H2D is when I was feeding in the filament to the little tube back here, I could only push it in so far. It would not go past these little orange kind of bumpers here. You're supposed to be able to push it all the way to the extruder, but I had to actually take my AMS unit off the top of the H2D, take the glass off, push these little orange things back, then I could actually feed the filament through the rest of the tube. I'm not sure if this is the way that it's supposed to work, but if you have to take your AMS unit off the H2D every time that you want to swap out your filament and take off the glass, that is a pretty big flaw, and it would get really annoying after a while. So in just a second, you'll see the extruder changed colors, and there's a little piece that will switch over from the right nozzle to the left to kind of keep the nozzle from oozing. But once it does that, you'll notice that the right nozzle will kind of hang there and it won't start printing for a few seconds, which actually gives the nozzle time to start oozing filament. And that's where the problem is. I think the nozzle needs to just switch over to the other nozzle and then immediately start printing, so there's not a lot of time for the nozzle to ooze filament. So you saw that the nozzle had time to ooze, and then it didn't wipe it off. It went directly to your print, and because that little bit of oozing, that's where you get those little bumps and inconsistencies in your print. And then at some point this happened. It seems like the print in the back lost adhesion and came off the bed, but the AI detection detected that something happened, and it seems to have stopped it fairly quickly because I don't see a lot of extra filament all over the build plate, and it's blinking red to let you know that something has happened. Now for this test, I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't use a prime tower and I used the rear print as like a sacrificial print, and you can see how bad the back print came out. It's got all these little bumps and whatnot on it. You can see all these little like raised pieces of filament where it changed colors. That's because it didn't wipe the filament off before it started printing. But the front print actually looks really good. I don't see any issues. We don't see any of those bumps on it. So if you're going to be printing something in more than one color, I would definitely recommend using a prime tower. This one project here was actually commissioned by one of my really good friends. He was building a flight simulator and he wanted a canopy release handle for his simulator. So I designed this and we're printing it out. It's actually a two-part design. It's the handle, and then we need to print the base out. All right, so it looks like our second attempt at our third 3D print has succeeded. Now for this print, I did add a prime tower. I also bumped up the temperature of the bed about 10 degrees Celsius. And I also added some extra supports, not really supports, but some ears to each corners of the print to help it to adhere to the bedding. And one thing I noticed, it kind of seems like Bambu Lab has set their temperature for their bedding a little bit low. I think they have it set for 55 degrees Celsius for the smooth PEI plate. So I bumped that up to about 65. And it seems like it helps the print stay adhered to the bedding. So if you come across your temperatures for smooth plating, your textured plating, I would just bump it up to maybe 10 degrees higher than what Bambu Lab has it set, and it should take care of any bed adhesion that you may have. There might still be some more issues because you might still need to use some glue with the smooth plating, but for the most part, I think bumping it up 10 degrees will help with adhesion. So again, this is our third print. I did make a prime tower, and as you guys can see on this prime tower, it definitely took the brunt of all of these little things that would have actually been on the print if we wouldn't have used a prime tower. That's pretty bad. And the one thing that I noticed, I actually printed this handle on my A1 with the prime tower, and the prime tower looked nothing like this. So I really think that Bambu Lab has to dial in their settings for their double nozzle setup, because this is not normal. I don't remember ever seeing these little spiky things on any of my other prints that I've done with my A1. And I actually found the prime tower that I used for this project on my A1. On the right here, you can see how nice and clean it is. It's perfectly printed, and this is why I never had to use a prime tower on my A1, because I never had any issues when I was changing colors. Whereas the H2D on the left here, you can see that if I didn't use a prime tower, I would have all these little spikes all over the actual print. And the price you're paying for the H2D, the quality should definitely not look like this. It should look more like the A1. But for the most part, this print looks pretty good. There is a little bit of, you know, some stringing on here, but overall, the print looks really nice. I don't see a lot of issues. Again, there's just like some stringing there. It just came off the bed. But I do think it looks pretty good. But this, if you don't use a prime tower, when you're making prints with dual colors, your print is going to come out just like this. So you definitely need to use a prime tower when you're using more than one color filament. Now, like I mentioned before, I did print this out on my A1, and this is where the H2D really shines. You can see that this handle I printed here with the A1, I didn't use like 100% flushing, and because the black is so dark versus the yellow, I got a lot of color bleed, and you can definitely see that in this print. But for the most part, the print actually came out pretty good, except for the bleeding here. And doing this on the A1, I think it caused about 600 grams of waste, which is about half a spool of filament. And that probably cost you maybe about $7 or $8. So it was a ton of waste. I'll also put a picture up to show you how much waste I actually had with this one particular print. It was ridiculous. But it did come out looking pretty good, minus, you know, the different color bleeding here. Now this one here, again, I did print on the H2D. It came out looking pretty good. And let me show you the waste that I had from the one that I printed on the H2D. It's ridiculous. There's almost no waste whatsoever. So if we kind of take a look inside here, you can see how much little waste. Like, don't mind the gray, that's from the other prints, but look at how much yellow and black there were just from this one print. That is a huge difference. There's almost no waste whatsoever for this one print versus the 2 tubs, a half a spool that I had for the print that I did on the A1. It's definitely saving you a lot of money in your multicolor prints, especially if you're only using 2 colors like I did here. So definitely a successful test. Very happy with the results here. And again, if you're going to be using prints that only use 2 colors, the H2D really shines. I just kind of wish that they had their prime tower dialed in a little bit better to where you might not even need to use a prime tower, because the prime tower definitely uses a lot more filament than you would actually need for this one print here. And another thing, the one that I printed out on the A1 took me 24 hours to print, whereas the one on the H2D, I think it only took, let me see, it took about 11 hours and 57 minutes. So you're cutting down about half the time for a print just like this. And this is not a very big print at all. I think I had about 30% infill, and it still took, you know, about 12 hours to print. So you're cutting down your print time when you're only using 2 colors for filament about half. That is very significant, at least it is to me, especially if you're going to be selling these and you need to kind of, you know, print them out and save money on your waste as well. And another thing that I noticed is when the prints are done, we always have this piece of like long string coming out of the one nozzle, and that's the one that was kind of capped off. So I don't understand how this filament kind of is coming out with this little cover over the end of the nozzle. That's why I think, again, Bambu Lab has to dial in some of their settings because of things like this. It's just things that shouldn't be happening, but they are, as you can see. All right, so print number 4 just completed. So let's take a look. So this was a 2-color print. You can see the main part is the gray, and then the inlay for the lettering was black. And the lettering definitely could be a lot better. So you can see how that came out. It's kind of, I don't know, kind of sloppy. It's not very sharp. Definitely could have looked a lot better, but the gray block part looks pretty good. Don't really see any issues with that. It seems like the H2D does a really good job at printing things in a single color, but when it comes to double color, you definitely need this prime tower, and you can see how it kind of, I don't know, just messes up. Now for a comparison, let me show you one that I did on my A1. And the one I did on the A1 is in the black here. You can see how the lettering is definitely a lot sharper looking. I think it looks a lot better than the one that the H2D did. And the printing is about the same. For the rest of the print, the quality is about the same. But that lettering, you can definitely see a difference. On the left is the A1, and on the right is the H2D. I don't exactly know what happened with the lettering there. This is the exact same print file as the one I used on the A1, and the A1 seemed to have come out better for the lettering at least. And this piece here is actually a 2-part. It's for the handle that I made here. So it goes in just like this, and then kind of, you can pull it back and forth once I put in that bolt. All right, so our 5th print just finished. This is another 2-color design. It's a lot smaller than some of the other projects that I've done prior. This is a Terminator chip, and it looks like it came out really good. Nice and sharp. I don't see any stringing. Actually, there's just a tiny bit on the top, but other than that, I think this came out really good. It's pretty sharp. Don't see any issues in the print. Again, we got the little purge tower because we are using 2 different colors. I think that came out pretty good. So here's the chip taken off the plate. You can see it a lot better. So that's the top. You can see the layer lines on there, but it looks pretty good, nice and sharp. And here's the bottom. Again, you can kind of see the layer lines just a little bit, but you can easily fix that by not using cooling for maybe like the first couple layers, and they should kind of mold into each other, but the print looks super clean. Look at that, looks really good on the sides. There's the front, the other side, and the bottom there. I think that came out really good. It only took about 37 minutes to do this one little double color print. And since I made the bottom portion of my Terminator chip, I also had to make the top chip portion. And this is a pretty small print. And I think that came out looking pretty sharp. I don't think there's any issues that I can really see. The lines are pretty clean. There's no lifting from the plate. And this is at a 0.08 layer height, about the smallest you can go on a 0.4 nozzle. And here's what the bottom part looks like that was on the plate. You can see some of the layer lines, but it's pretty smooth. All right, so my H2D just ran into an issue, and it was actually with the AMS unit trying to feed in this purple PLA filament. Like I mentioned before, I was having this kind of issue with the manual spool holder on the side, but now the AMS is actually doing it as well. So what's happening is it's trying to feed in the filament, but you can see those orange tabs up there. It's getting stuck right at that orange lever and it won't feed the rest of the way into the tubing. So as you can see, it's flashing red and it's telling me that it's unable to feed the filament. So I'm gonna push finish continue to show you what it's actually doing. So let's see it try to load again. So it's unspooling or spooling up the filament. Then it's gonna try to reload it and you'll see it'll hit that top orange, see? So it's getting stuck, it's retracting again. So it's trying once more. It's feeding it and it's probably gonna get stuck again. And it did. So it's gonna keep doing that and it's not gonna be able to do the print. So if you were actually printing something that was in multiple colors and it got stuck and you weren't home or something, it would just stop the print. You wouldn't be able to continue. And this is the first time I've seen this happen with the AMS unit. It was only happening with me manually trying to feed in the filament. So there's a couple things you can do. You can take the filament out and try to, fix the end of the filament. Maybe it's getting stuck on something. Or, see, it's got a problem. Or you're gonna have to take the AMS unit off the H2D, open up the glass here, and then fiddle with that little orange tab on the back there. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna try to fix the end of the filament and see if that does anything. So we won't have to mess around with the AMS unit and the glass. So I'm gonna take this out. So it doesn't look like the end is like really jagged or anything. I don't see why it would be getting stuck on something. So just kind of like try to straighten it out a little bit. Then we'll feed it back in. Say finished and we'll try it again. And that time it fixed it. So it actually went all the way through. So if your filament isn't like perfectly straightened, I mean, I didn't think mine was, crooked at all, but it needs to be perfectly straight to go through, continue through that tubing over there. I'm not sure why Bambu Lab didn't kind of make like the end of the tubing kind of flanged out so that the filament can feed in a lot easier, but I mean, that's what we're dealing with. So that's one of the issues that I ran into. For this project, I wanted to pick something that was a little bit bigger than what I've been normally printing, and I thought a face mask would be perfect, and I've always wanted one of these. All right, so it is all completed, and this print took 15 hours and 27 minutes and used 182 grams of filament. This one I definitely let start overnight, and then it finished up now at about 12:45 p.m. So I wanted to do a little bit of a bigger print, and I've always wanted a mask from the movie Mask. So here it is. I printed it out in a green filament, and it looks like it came out perfect. That really looks like wood too. Now I will have to paint this to make it look a little bit more accurate, but for the most part, it came out looking great. There's just a couple like little pieces down at the very top here at the chin and at the very bottom of the nose piece. You can kind of see where it's not 100% smooth, but I definitely think that print came out really good. You can see all the supports. Not too much. Mostly the supports are down at the bottom here. And I also didn't have any bed adhesion issues. I believe because I bumped up the temperature that Bambu Lab had from 55°C to 65°C, and it adhered perfectly. All right, so I think it's cooled down enough, so we'll kind of just take this off the plate here. Just want the mask to come off the supports that are on the plate. Just like that, perfect. Just set this down here. And we have these other supports inside. Those just came right off. Perfect. And the mask looks really nice. Now on the top here where the supports were, you can definitely see that there's some rough edges, and I can very easily just kind of sand those down, but the mask kind of looks like it's supposed to be wood, so you can make that blend in fairly easily. But look at the inside of the mask. I think it looks great. No issues. That looks perfect. I think it fits pretty good. I can't see how it looks on my face, but you guys get the idea. That is pretty cool. Now back to the Prime Tower. Again, the main reason why I purchased the H2D was to cut down on a lot of the time and the waste between having to change through filaments and actually having to purge. And this Prime Tower seems to kind of negate most of that because it does waste a lot of extra filament making this Prime Tower. And as you saw from the prints that I did in this video, if you don't use this Prime Tower, your print will end up getting a lot of these little spikes on it, which will totally ruin the print. So I do think over time, Bambu Lab should be able to dial in their settings and kind of fix the oozing that happens between the filament, or actually the nozzle swaps, because that really shouldn't happen. And I never had to use this Prime Tower when I was printing on my A1 because right after it got done doing the purge, it went right to the print. So there was really no oozing or anything like that, whereas the H2D seems to be having that issue. Now I haven't been using Bambu Lab's filament for any of my prints, but I don't think that's where the issue is because I've been using third-party filaments on my Bambu Lab A1s and they've been working flawlessly. I think Bambu Lab kind of has to dial in how the nozzles change, the timing, maybe the flow of the filament along with the temperature. I'm sure all of that in combination has something to do with the oozing issue. Now the things in this video that you saw that I printed were just some of the things that I printed on the H2D. I've printed much more than what you saw, but I saved all the coolest stuff for my video. And as far as the quality of the prints, I don't think that they're that much better than the Bambu Lab A1. In some instances, it was actually worse. And for the price that Bambu Lab is asking for this printer, I think that your 3D print should come out flawless every time. Now, do I regret purchasing the H2D? I wouldn't say I regret it. I just kind of wish that it was a lot cheaper because I don't really care about the laser engraving. I don't care about the cutting. The biggest thing that I cared about for the H2D was the dual nozzle and the 3D printing. They should have just made the H2D purely for 3D printing to bring the cost down and left all the other options out. I will tell you though that I absolutely love the heated chamber because now I can print a whole bunch of other different types of filaments, whereas I couldn't do that with the A1 because it didn't have an enclosure. Also, the AMS2 is awesome. I think it's a lot better than the AMS Lite that I've been using on my A1. Not only is it quicker to change the filaments, it's also easier and it can also dry your filament as well. If you're going to be doing multiple color prints, I would definitely recommend getting 2 of the AMS Pros if you can afford it, because then you don't have to go over to the side and manually feed in the filament. You can have the 4 filaments on one nozzle and 4 filaments on the other, which will also give you more options for different colors, and that's less swapping that you have to do as well. Another thing that I absolutely love on the H2D is the camera quality and the speed. On my A1, it does have a camera, but when you're viewing it from your app on your phone to see what your print's doing, it's super choppy. It's the frames per second is super low, so you'll see the nozzle on one area 1 second, and then all of a sudden it'll move to another. It's not really smooth, whereas the H2D, it's pretty much just like you're looking through the glass. That's how smooth everything is, and that's how clear it is. So you can very clearly see what's going on in the printer and where it's at in the print. So if you're looking to purchase the H2D, just know that it is going to slightly cut down on times if you're doing 2 color prints, but as far as saving filament, if you're going to be using 2 different colors, you're definitely going to need to use this prime tower, and it is going to use more filament than you want to use. So it's not getting ejected into the poop bin, it's actually getting used into this prime tower, which again, I'm hoping that Bambu Lab will be able to address in a software update later on down the road, because the A1 has definitely gotten better over time, and I'm sure the H2D will be the same case. Also, something that I think is very important that I didn't know that I wish I did when I began my 3D printing journey is the A1 is a bed slinger. So your print is sitting on the bed and it's kind of moving the print back and forth, which isn't a big deal until you start printing things that get kind of tall and a little skinny. Because when it's moving on the bed super quick, there can be little issues or ripples in the top of your print because it is kind of throwing your 3D print around, whereas the H2D doesn't do that. The bed just simply moves up and down and the head moves, so there's no wobbling around of your 3D print. So if you're looking to print more taller things like statues, things like that, the H2D might actually be a better option for you, or maybe the X1, because the bed doesn't move back and forth. That's just something I didn't know when I began my 3D printing journey, but I just wanted to mention to you. And if you guys want to pick this up yourself or check out my Etsy page, I will be putting links in the video description. And if you guys enjoyed the video, please let me know by hitting the like button and consider subscribing. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.